Is this too low? It's totally cutting off your head. Sandy, is this too low? It's totally cutting off your head. Oh, you didn't say it. Yes. I think we got your good side. Yeah, there we go. You're perfectly covering the G for God.
All right, we're going to go ahead and say a prayer and get started. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. We thank you, Lord, for our blessings. We ask you, Lord, that you would continue to be with us as we walk through this last bit of your prophet, Habakkuk. Lord, help us to see what he saw, to experience what he saw. And Lord, help us to grow and help us to be able to see the challenges and the conditions of today, and to know that we have hope in them and through them, and then we have your power as well. Through the intercessions of all your saints, so please you from the beginning here, as we say, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. In Christ Jesus our Lord, for thine is the kingdom and power and glory. All right. Part 3 of Habakkuk. Now, before we get into Habakkuk, I want to share with you and get your help, because I'll be honest, I ran into a parenting challenge this week. So I'm sitting in the car. We get into the car. In the back seat, there's a toy, and it's Ava's toy. And Elijah gets in, and he wants a toy. Elijah's my son, he's older, and Ava is younger. And so, I thought you were in Sunday school. I was supposed to tell a story. All right. And so, got in, and he wanted a toy. And Ava said, no, it's my toy. And as a parent, you can see where this is going. So I was like, Ava, or Elijah asked her to share, and he asked, he's like, Ava, can you share your toy? And she said no. And so he's getting upset. And so I'm trying to police this from the front seat while I'm driving, and you can see like it's escalating. I was like, Ava, he has to share, but if you don't want to share, it's your toy, so you don't have to share. Okay? So you gotta, in order to share, you have to teach ownership first. All right? And so she's like, nope, I don't want to share. And so the next response was, well, I'm not sharing anything. I was like, okay, you can choose to do that, Elijah, but it's good for us to share. Well, it's unfair if I share and she doesn't have to share. So I'm like, all right. It is unfair if she doesn't want to share, but you share. I can see how it's unfair. But Elijah, it's a good thing to share. He's like, why? It's unfair to share. So I'm like, all right. How do we've talked about sharing, we've talked about generosity and all these different things. So I'm sitting here, I'm like, how do you make an argument? Tell him that sharing is a good choice to make. Because what he's seeing in the situation is it's unfair, and if she doesn't share, then why should I have to share? So I started to talk to him. I was like, because Elijah, when you make a choice, you free yourself from having the circumstances around you decide what you will and will not do. He's like, huh? And so I'm sweating, trying to figure out how to navigate this situation. But I think his point was good. It was just like, okay, if she's not sharing and I share, it's unfair. But the point I'm trying to, get him to grasp is that you can't let the outside circumstances determine what you are or are not going to do in life. Because once you let the outside circumstances decide what you're going to do, what have you done and what have you lost? You've given power to the outside circumstances, and essentially what you forfeited is the freedom to make a morally based choice. Because the morals that we've talked about and are parenting about revolve around generosity, giving, and sharing. But that's a free choice that you have to make. And the circumstances are always going to be challenging to do those things. And you can either say, well, circumstances are unfair, therefore I'm not going to do it. Thinking we've won, but in actuality, we've lost. We've lost. I never thought parenting at the age of 6 was going to be hard. I'm afraid of what's coming. All right? But I think kind of going on that train of thought, okay? Habakkuk started the book off, and he started to ask questions. Okay, and the first question he asked was, why is there such injustice in the world? Okay? Why is there such injustice in the world? Why is there so much evil? And where are you, God, in all this evil? Like, I don't see you. All right? And in week 1 we talked about how do we deal with the existence of God and the proof of God in the setting of evil and what appears to us as the absence of God in the situation. All right? That was week 1. Week 2 kind of talked about, Habakkuk asked another question. He said, why do I see all these evil individuals doing such horrible things, and it seems like they're prospering? All right? Why then should I not follow suit? Why should I not follow suit? That was a question they asked. All right? And when you kind of ask these two questions, why do I see so much evilness around, and why do I see evil individuals prospering by living by such amoral lives? It kind of makes it hard to make a case for the gospel. When you see evil present and very little good, and you see evil people prospering without living a morally life, and what space then do you have for the message of the gospel in all that, which is kind of the world that we live in? So those are two questions that Habakkuk had in the book. But you know what? We share very similar questions. All right? We share very similar questions with respect to the way we manage our lives and the way we deal with the conflict and the way we work through the challenges of life, that sometimes it makes it hard for us to make a case for ourselves to live according to the way God wants us to live. Okay, let me give a couple of examples. I'm going to have a bunch of examples, because my hope is that everybody would, identify with one. But some people say, like, well, why should I keep tithing when my budget is so tight? Okay? Every time I go on vacation, it's always like, it isn't so relaxing because we're always watching everything that we're doing financially. Or when my car breaks down for the month, it just gives me such anxiety. Like grocery bill, when I'm buying all this food that we just need, tends to just stress me out. Why should I keep on tithing? Why not just kind of keep that little extra? It'll help buffer me. Why do I keep this practice up? Why do I have to be the only employee in my office or in my work or my team that keeps on asking for Sundays off? It's kind of annoying. Everybody is just so flexible with their time, and probably because they're so flexible, they're more likely to move up the corporate ladder. Why do I sacrifice? Why do I make a big deal out of getting my Sundays off? All right? Why should I be careful about the music or the clothes that I wear? When I go out, why can't I just fit in with what everybody else is doing? Because it makes it easier. Okay? Why should I choose to dress in a certain way or not listen to certain music? Why should I be careful of the language I use? Why should I not call my cell phone company or cable company and take out all my burdens of the world on them in hopes that I'm going to get the best package possible and use all the tricks of the trade, all this manipulative language? Why not do that? These are the daily challenges that we face in our lives, wondering well, why should I choose to do things God way when life just feels so unfair? There's so much injustice in the world, and I feel like by following God's way, I continue to get the short end of the stick. And when we continue to think we always have the short end of the stick, it becomes harder and harder to live according to the way God wants us to live. Right? Why do I have to keep on battling with my kids? Tell them, no, we're not going to do that. No, we're not going to watch that. No, we're not going to go there. Like, Mom, Dad, everybody's doing it. Mom, Dad, everybody has this. Mom and Dad, like, everybody saw this movie. Why are we going to keep on fighting those battles? All right? Why am I going to keep on coming to church, reading my Bible, and praying when all the stresses of my life just seem to continue to intensify? Where's your hand in all this? Why do I keep on trying to do life your way? Those seem like questions we kind of wrestle with in life, where we know that there's a way that God is leading to us, God is leading us on, but oftentimes we think if we follow His way, we will end up with the short end of the stick. And when we feel like we end up with the short end of the stick over and over and over, doing things the other ways seems more and more tempting as time goes on. But there's something that we need to think about, and God begins to respond. And these aren't direct responses, but these are responses kind of, hidden within the verses. Okay? We need to think of it with respect to the immediate, the delayed, and the inevitable. Okay? When we look at God and we start to ask these questions of why is there so much injustice? Why is there so much unfairness going on? Okay? Frequently what's going on is we are looking at the immediate situation. Okay? And I'll qualify the immediate situation as being sometimes months, sometimes years, sometimes like even a decade. Okay? When you're talking to somebody who is eternal, the months and years of our lives and the decades seem eternal to us, but to Him, it's a small period of time. Right? So we tend to be looking at the immediate situation. Okay? We have a hard time, how many of us have the next 3 months of their life planned out? Some of us do, some of us don't. What about 1 year, 3 year, 5 year plan? Do we think that far out? No. So our attention is always geared towards the immediate. And when we see the immediate in a bad situation, we have a hard time making sense of it. And that's frequently when we look up at God, we say, what's going on? Where are you? Where's your hand in all this? All right, so we need to stop looking at the immediate and realize that we are communing and talking with a God who is everlasting. All right? Now, when we look at the immediate and we think there's injustice and unfairness going on, whether to other people or to myself, all right, and we are tempted to begin to change the pattern of life that God has, from what God has called us to what seems tempting and what seems to get good responses or immediate responses, we're given a warning. Saying, understand that there are delayed consequences in some situations. That there are delayed consequences in some situations. All right? I'll give you an example. When you have poor study habits through elementary, middle school, and high school, are you thinking that these poor study habits are going to have an effect on your career and finances later on in life? It's a delayed consequence. Are you thinking about it in the immediate? No. You're just thinking immediately everybody else is having fun, studying is boring, I want what they want. Okay, so let me go easy on my study habits. But there are delayed consequences. Lacking transparency in relationships usually leads to heartbreaking fractures later on in life. When we don't know how to talk with each other, when we don't know how to deal with the issues of life and deal with them now and deal with them honestly, slowly over time we have all this buildup of baggage, which eventually later on leads to a fracture in the relationship. A common one that I frequently run into is parents who come to me as adults and are just torn or broken because of the relationship that they don't have with their kids, who are now adults now. That when their kids were growing up, they couldn't see that life needed balance. There needed to be margins, that you took on a responsibility by having a kid, therefore you needed to lighten up on some responsibilities in order to raise your child, to be there. All right? And this is something that is really difficult to deal with, but when an adult never emotionally matures or mentally matures, and they end up leaking out all their frustration in life on their kid, they don't see that later on in life, they're going to pay for that. And that's a tough one. That's a delayed consequence. Immediate is, well, I need to work, I need to do all these things, I need to pay attention to these things, and I'll get to my kid later on. Okay? We look for the immediate, say it's unfair, I'm going to do what I want, but we forget about delayed consequences. Alright? Smoking always seems like a great idea, but when you're 65 and you got grandkids, try dragging the oxygen tank around your grandkids. It gets a little bit hard. Delayed consequences. Alright? So we need to stop thinking about the immediate. We have to understand that there are delayed consequences to the actions and decisions we have in life. Okay? But God also says that a collapse to certain behaviors is inevitable. That certain behaviors and decisions that we make in life and certain lifestyles that we choose to take on inevitably and always will come to a collapse. Okay? And he did this in chapter 2. All right? In verse 3 of chapter 2, I'm going to quickly touch on this. He said, though it tarries, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry. What's he talking about? The consequences that will come upon those individuals who are living such amoral lives. And then he goes and he has 5 warnings in chapter 2, and I put them up here. Woe to him who increases what is not his. Translation, living outside of your limits. Woe to you if you keep on living outside of what you have and the ability that you have and the finances you have and all these different things, because eventually your creditors are going to come. All right? Woe to him who covets evil gain for his house. Okay? Being selfish and through your selfishness attaining wrongful growth. All right? Woe to him who builds a town with bloodshed, meaning like when you sacrifice others for your own personal gain, because eventually everybody that you sacrifice eventually will rise up and they're coming for you. And that's what he said was going to happen to the Chaldeans and eventually the Babylonians. And every big empire that we see in history who treated everybody so poorly, eventually they were overthrown. Did it happen right away? No. Was it delayed? Yes. Was it inevitable? Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay? Woe to him who gives drink to his neighbor. Translation, deceitful. Okay? Deceitful living. Essentially like cheating everybody, lying to everybody. You want to booze them up in order to reduce their inhibitions in order to get what you want. Eventually they will sober up. And they will come back around. And the last one he said in chapter 2 was, woe to him who says, would awake. Pretty much the idols that we build for ourselves. When we look, we build up idols, whether it be our finances, our bank accounts, our careers, all these different things that we think are going to bring life to us, and we give them so much time and attention, eventually these idols will bring us down. So in chapter 2, he gave us 5 warnings. And he said, inevitably, when you follow one of these tracks, these will lead to your collapse. And that's what happened to the empire. All the empires came crashing down. We have seen, in present day, we have seen big companies who are doing so well, all of a sudden, boom, bankrupt. You start to look through the weeds, dishonesty. You start to see where the money trail is, where the paper trail is. You find your answer. You find your answer. And so it serves as a warning to us. Okay? And I kid you not, I'm sharing this with you, but I have goosebumps and shivers because I know, man, there's so many areas in my life where I need to look and say, whoa, woe to me. So the collapse is inevitable when we choose certain pathways in life. God promises that. He says, it will come, it will not tarry. Just wait for it, it's coming. But now Habakkuk and us are in a dilemma. Life seems unfair when we aim to live righteously and according to God's design. It seems like the rich get richer, the poor get poorer, evil keeps winning, and for every good deed that I do, 5 worse are done. So why continue? God promised that living outside the boundaries He has set for us will lead to a life that will come crashing down. Right? And He said in chapter 2, "Behold the proud, his soul is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith." Right? This verse challenges us to exercise great wisdom. This verse challenges us to exercise great wisdom. To look at life currently and say, with the way I'm living, where would this ultimately lead? And then have the courage to come back and correct. That takes courage, takes strength, and it takes a miracle. But God is our miracle. God is our answer to all that. We have to wrestle with these choices. If we don't wrestle with these choices, then we will lose the battle. Right? One of my favorite Psalms is Psalm 73. And Psalm 73 was written by Asaph, not by David. But it's a psalm where Asaph was looking out, and I encourage you to go home and read it tonight. I'm going to pick on one verse from it. But Asaph was looking out, and he was just seeing, similar to Habakkuk, all these people doing evil things, living in a way that was clearly different than the way God had described to us. And he's struggling in his own spiritual life. And he's looking and saying, it looks tempting. I want to go. Like, why am I struggling with all this spiritual stuff? Why am I wrestling in my relationship with God? It just seems they have it easy, they're getting what they want, and I'm struggling. I want to go. And he wrestled with it, and wrestled with it, wrestled with it. And verse 17 through 19, Psalm 73, finally went into and asked God very directly. He said, "Until I went into the sanctuary of God, then I understood their end. Surely you set them in a slippery places. You cast them down to destruction. Oh, how they are brought to desolation as in a moment." We're all tempted. We're all tempted to kind of jettison the struggle that we're in. Because the other side does look good sometimes. Let's be honest with ourselves. It entices us quite frequently. But we're challenged daily to say, but what is the end of it? So after God responded to Habakkuk, and Habakkuk knew a correction was coming. We talked about that last week. He said, "Let me sit on high and wait for you to correct me." And he got his correction. And in chapter 3, verse 2, he said this. It was after the Lord is done speaking, and Habakkuk waited, he saw, he listened, he inscribed it as he was told, and then he begins to speak again. "O Lord, I have heard your speech and was afraid. O Lord, revive your work in the midst of the years. In the midst of the years, make it known. In wrath, remember mercy. O Lord, I have heard your speech and was afraid. O Lord, revive your work in the midst of the years. In the midst of the years, make it known. And in wrath, remember mercy." First, a beautiful verse, and Habakkuk touches on 3 things. Okay? Habakkuk knows that humanity is the work of God. Habakkuk knows that humanity is the work of God. And he says, revive your work. Raise up humanity again. We're crumbling down, but raise up humanity again. Okay? The other thing he points out is saying, in the raising up of humanity, reveal yourself to all. Make yourself known. Because in that process where God raises us up, he does so in a way of revelation. He reveals himself to us. We grow in our knowledge of him. And that comes the power to begin to change our circumstances. Okay? But he also says that in your wrath, remember mercy. In wrath, remember mercy. Because he knows what is inevitable. He knows, and he's been told by God, that all these behaviors are going to lead to destruction. Wrath is coming. You can't live a life like that and say, oh, okay, I don't want the wrath of it. Not even the thief on the right escaped the wrath that was due to him. Okay, he lived the life he wanted to live. There was wrath. Not God's wrath, but there was a consequence. There was a punishment to the life he chose to live. But there in the consequence was mercy. There was mercy. And so he asked for mercy on all those who will be crushed and collapse because of the choices that they made. So he asked for three things. Revive your work, lift up humanity, reveal yourself to all, and be merciful. And God does that. Okay? And in chapter 3, really verses 3 through 15, which we're not going to read, Habakkuk goes and he just talks about the awesomeness of God, how mighty he is. And this is a product of being able to see God, okay? Because though Habakkuk had a lot of questions, what did he do that really worked for him? He went to prayer. He waited for God to speak. This book wasn't written overnight. This book was written over years, okay? So he went to prayer. He waited for God to reveal himself, and he saw the awesomeness of God. He saw that this evilness that he looked out on, he saw what was going to happen of it. God revealed to him what was coming. But in the revelation, he saw the awesomeness of God. And it put him at rest. And he went on to speak about it. He spoke about the awesomeness of God in verses 3 through 15. All right? But it's the last 3 verses of chapter 3 that are awesome and really bring this book to a really nice close. And this is where we're going to spend the rest of our meditation. All right? Habakkuk started off this book in a really bad place, with a lot of questions, a lot of bewilderment, a lot of frustration, a lot of shaking your fist at God. That's how he started, but it's not how he finishes. All right? He ends elated and with praise, and that's what verses 17 through 19 capture. All right, it says, though the fig tree may not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, though the labor of the olive may fail, and the field yield no fruit, though the flock may be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stalls, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. The Lord God is my strength, and he will make my feet like deer's feet, and he will make me walk on my high hills. I picture Habakkuk writing this with a smile. But when we look at these verses, okay, and you look at specifically verse 17, which says, though the fig tree may not blossom, nor fruit be on the vines, though the labor of the olive may fail, and the fields yield no food, though the flock may be cut off from the fold, and there be no herd in the stall. What is he describing? Good situation, bad situation. Bad situation. Nothing has really changed for Habakkuk. He's still looking out and he's seeing the same thing. And he will fall off the prophetic scene seeing the same thing. Based on what historians say, his prophetic career comes to an end before the exile happens. So he comes and he sees badness, and God reveals to him what is going to come. Nothing changes in the circumstances of Habakkuk. He's still describing a bad situation. The figs don't blossom, there are no vines, the olives fail, there's no food, and the flock is cut off, and there's no herds. Back in those days, what else do you have to go on? Essentially putting all your money in the stock market and saying, well, that went bad. All right? And that's a situation he's looking at. The circumstances didn't change for Habakkuk, but he clearly sees things differently. And that's what we see in verses 18 and 19, where he says, "Yet I will rejoice in the Lord, I will joy in the God of my salvation. The Lord God is my strength, and he will make my feet like deer's feet, and he will make me walk on my high hills." What Habakkuk received was divine perspective. And perspective takes you out of the immediate, helps you appreciate the delayed consequences of life, and shows you what is inevitable. And what Habakkuk is saying is that I now realize that if I go down that path, what's coming? If I stay in the path and the lane that God has kept me on, I know what's coming. My salvation. It's not going to be easy. I'm not going to get the things that I want. Okay? The herd, the figs, the blossom, all these different things. They may not always be there. But I know what God has promised me. Habakkuk has learned to live on the promises of God. And that even when it's tough, even when we want to cheat, even when we want to go off the path of God, salvation helps us keep the long view always in mind. Because salvation knows that I can't merit on my own, so I need to pull strength from on high. And when I pull strength from on high, in order to do that, I got to commune with God. And as I continue to commune with God, He will give me what I need, He'll provide what I need, and though I may not see a change in my circumstances, I know that salvation is coming. And not only that salvation is coming, but he says something really cool. He says, He will make my feet like deer's feet, and He will make me walk on my high hills. What was so unique about deer? Deers were known to have very good footing. Okay? You ever see a deer fall? No, I mean, you drive a car and they know how to get out of the way. They have good footing. Right? They have good reflexes. Do you want good footing up in high places? We want good footing in high places. Right? We go out like play sports and we want the best traction possible. What about in life? We want good footing in high places, because in high places, the stakes are high. Right? Last summer I was in Colorado, and there is a mountain that you can drive the car up, and is at 14,000 feet above, or 14 or 16,000 feet above sea level. It is the second highest mountaintop in the States. Okay? And we're driving up, and like we're on our way to the airport. We're like, okay, we'll drive up halfway, all right, because we got to make it to the airport. And we're driving up, and like it's beautiful as you're driving up. But as you continue to go up, okay, the roads get narrower, all right? The two-way roads get narrower. And no joke, like when you look outside your window, there's no guardrail. There's not enough room for a guardrail. So I'm driving, and everybody's like, oh, look at that, that's so beautiful. And like you want to look, but the stakes are high, right? Stakes are high. Start to look, and you do one of these things, like it's done, right? So as like we got higher and higher, the temptation to look was greater because the scene was more beautiful, more enticing. But it's a choice. It's either enjoy the scene and become part of the scene, or keep on going to the top of the mountain, in which you will get the supreme scene. You get to see everything. It's really tempting. The things were beautiful. And when we stopped Sure, I took a quick look, but once we started going, it's eyes on the road, 2 hands on the wheel. And that was still nerve-wracking. So as you get higher, the stakes are higher. There's more to lose. So what sort of ground or what sort of traction do you want in life? A slippery slope, compromising life, or a life of focus, a life of concentration, a life of knowing that, okay, it's tempting, it looks beautiful, but it will be much more beautiful when I make it to the top in one piece. And that's what we do in life. When we're driving through life, we look and we're like, oh, it's so beautiful. I want to stop and look. But when we take our eyes off the road, we can fall off. And as we progress, the stakes are higher. We don't want to lose salvation. It's the mountain peak. So he equates it to saying, you want deer's feet in high places. You don't want our human feet. You want deer's feet in high places. Because we want sure footing. Because we don't want to slip off the mountain. As we make it closer and closer to heaven, we don't want to slip off the mountain. So stay focused. Don't look left or right. Though I'm sure it's beautiful and it's nice, but the best is at the top. The best is at the top. So Habakkuk encourages you and I. He says, look, I know you see violence. And I know you see evilness, and unfair things happening, and that it's tempting. But we have our warnings. We have our promises of, that those warnings will reap destruction. But we're told time and again, throughout Scripture, say it's not about having deer in the stall, it's not about having vines or anything like that. It's about making it to the top. We make it to the top by following the path God has laid out for us. In our morals, in our Scripture, in our community here at church, as we commune with God, all these different things keep us from veering off. Any questions? All right. Well, that concludes our summer Bible study series with character, a theme, and a book over the last 10 weeks. It's been kind of cool. I've really enjoyed it. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope along the way you've learned something on how to study character, how to study a theme in the Bible, and how to study a book. Okay? So all the recordings will be online. Let's stand up and pray. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, one God, and we thank you, Lord, for all your blessings. We thank you that you brought us here. We ask, Lord, that you would help us stay focused, to look and to know that when we look outside, we will see injustice. When we look outside, we will see violence. When we look outside, we will see ways that seem tempting, that seem great, that seem like we would enjoy ourselves there. And truly we would. But we know that those ways, and you told us those ways, will collapse. And those ways will take us away from what we are aiming for, which is the sun, which is you, Lord, which is the top, which is heaven. Lord, help us to be strong. Help us to stay faithful. Help us to be focused. And to not be tempted, to take on other lifestyles or other moral systems, Lord, because you've given us what is perfect. You've not given us what is easy, but you have given us what is perfect. Help us to be faithful and to trust solely in your promises. Through the intercession of all your saints, who please you from the beginning here, as we say, our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. In Christ Jesus our Lord, thine is the kingdom, power, and glory. Now the love of God, the Father, the grace of his only begotten Son, our Lord God and Savior Jesus Christ, who gives the Holy Spirit, be with you all, love and peace. The Lord be with you.
Very good summary.